What's up, everyone? Welcome back to GGS, and thank you for tuning in. Today, we're going to be transforming the wonderful Rayquaza and Deoxys Legend card into a 3D figure. So, without further ado, let's get started. And real quick before we begin, check out the link in the description to find my shop, and you could browse any items that might be of interest to you, including these guys. And of course, leave a like and a comment, and subscribe for more if you like what you're seeing. Alright, so first, let's start with Rayquaza. As you know, super sick. Fortunately, he's not going to be too hard to make, and you could see a lot of the basic shapes already. Alright, so let's start with the spheres. Now, there's not a lot here. Also, I love the pixelation, but check this out. So it's going to be just pretty much the eye. We're going to be using spheres to stretch out these parts that represent the gums. And then, of course, extruding the points for his teeth. Going to use it for the hands, right here in the shoulders, and right here for his noggin. Let's move on to the cubes. Okay, now there's a couple of deceiving things here. This general shape for his snout and his skull are going to be cubes that we're going to be cutting. And then, right here at this point, all we're going to do is make a nice long cut like this, and a nice one like that, to get this angled structure. Same thing for the spines that are behind his skull. The main body of each of these fins are going to be made of cubes that we're going to be flattening and cutting at various angles. Alright, now we're going to have a lot of fun with tubes. There's going to be plenty of them, so pay attention. So I think the most obvious one is the entirety of the body. That's just going to be one enormous tube that we're going to be positioning as we get ready to set Rayquaza in his final orientation. Each of the fingers are going to be little thick tubes that we're going to be putting around the spherical hands. That way it also makes it easy to pose them. And each of these segmentations are going to be tubes that we're just going to fit on top of the big tube that we're using for the main body. Almost forgot something super important. Each one of the perimeters of these fins are going to be tubes. By setting them as tubes, it'll very easily allow us to line the edge of the boxes that we're going to be using for the body of the fins. Now we could do the cones. Tip of the body's an obvious one. Each of the claws are going to be cones that we're going to slightly angle. Same goes for the teeth that are right in the front of his snout. And that pretty much sums Rayquaza up. Pretty straightforward. The shapes are obvious, which is typical of Pokemon's fantastic shape language. So now, let's move on to Deoxys. Okay, here's our resident Freakazoid. You know the drill. Spheres are red. We got an obvious one right here. And we're going to do another for the midsection of his face, and another that we're going to flatten for his crest. Here's a sphere for his pelvis, and another for the discs of his hips that we're just going to be flattening. Another sphere for the protrusions on his thighs. We're going to be warping a sphere for his collar. Can't forget the eyes. Here's a long one for these protrusions on his ears, I guess is what they are. Believe it or not, we're actually going to be using a rectangular prism for his brain. That's what that is. Come on, guys. We know. Alright, now let's do a couple of boxes. Got a nice one right here that we're going to be smoothing the edges of. And the other major ones are going to be right here for the ears that are on the side of his head. Next, let's do some cylinders. Neck is an obvious one, and so is the abdomen. And last but not least, let's do some tubes. Now, each of the arms are very obvious ones. Right? These are just tubes that we're going to be weaving together like a braid. And of course, the legs are going to be tubes that are going to have a single point right at the knees to allow them to be easily posed. Now, the thing is, we're actually going to be making his left arm a hand, and that's just going to be made with a tube, then a sphere for the palm, and then more tubes for the fingers. Alright. Now that the blockout is done for both of these frenemies, let's get to the sculpt. Alright, first things first, let's chop up that box to serve as the foundation of Rayquaza's skull. Sphere for the noggin, box for the bottom jaw, and a spherical tongue. And here we're just chopping up some boxes to add the spines. Just like we talked about, we're going to be taking some spheres, stretching them out, and duplicating them to represent the top and bottom sets of gums. And you'll see right down the middle of them, we're going to extrude small sections to serve as his teeth. Quick cones for the fangs. With the basics of his head done, let's start working on the body. Here comes the blackout of the arms. They're just a group of spheres and cylinders all strung together. Fingers are important, so let's add those tubes. Certainly need some cylinders for the claws. Now it's time to position him. We're going to set up the head and begin moving the joints of the arms to get it as close as possible to the reference image that you see behind you. That's the official Rayquaza Deoxys Legend card. Beautiful card. And we're going to try to set up our pose to mimic it as best as possible. You'll see that with this tube that I'm building, it's all just one huge unit that we're going to be building little segmentations on. There's that little cone for the end. Time to make all those fins. All we have to do is use those tubes to create the perimeter, and then those thin boxes to be the mesh between the tubes. Alright, now there you have it. All is said and done, and here's the blackout for Rayquaza. You see, not so bad. Just some boxes, couple spheres here and there. You know, it's really just wash, rinse, and repeat. Lots of tubes, consistent structures that build on each other. Overall, very clean. Super happy with the way that this looks. So now, let's get started on Deoxys. Now, despite being what I do think is a little bit more structurally intricate than Rayquaza, I found Deoxys to be a little bit easier to make because the shapes were so incredibly clear-cut. You see that what we've been doing so far is using some spheres, couple boxes here and there, a little bit more spheres to make the general structure that we had discussed in the blackout stage. So you see here, instead of using another set of tubes, we're going to be creating the arm. And that's just made with one big tube, that big sphere, and now we're just using tiny tubes to represent the fingers. Now this next part was a lot of fun. We took two tubes, and we're just going to weave it together. I had used the analogy of a braid before, and that's essentially what it is. We're just using all the different nodes and weaving one of these tubes around the other and trying to make it look as balanced as possible. Last but not least, let's add the brain and check out Deoxys. I mean, he's not super far off from that masterpiece, but this is the basic structure. You could see all the shapes come together really nicely, and this is just a byproduct of Pokemon's fantastic shape language, as I had mentioned in the blackout stage. So now, let's get them all posed up. Setting this up is as straightforward as you could expect. Just give him a little tilt, make him have a dynamic arm, move those little tentacles around, and we are done. Check it out. We have our insane serpent sky dragon chasing after our little alien invader. Love the pose, like the way that these guys are set up. It is a great dynamic. They are rivals for a reason and fan favorites for a reason. But it's not complete without a base. The general idea that I went for here was to have Rayquaza sit atop a sort of storm or tornado. Throughout this mesh, all we're going to do is use simple strokes to create a spiraling effect, and then we're going to make it even more pronounced by taking the drag tool and really spinning it around. Of course, we need a cylindrical base. And let's have another spacey effect for Deoxys, just something simple. And after some detail work, voila, the base mesh is finally done. So happy with the way these guys look. The details wind up coming on super nice, but let's throw in some color and finish the job.
Oh, come on! You gotta admit this is cool!
As you could imagine, I am super happy with the way that this looks. I love the colors, I love the way that they interact with each other, I love how it actually works as a practical piece. But, to prove that, let's get them on the printer and bring these guys into the real world. Now here's a little surprise for everyone. My wickedly talented painter Lyrigen, links in the description for her Instagram, painted these guys shiny. And I think that they look phenomenal. So as usual, leave a like, comment, and sub for more. And thanks again for watching. Bye-bye.